pronounce, the Alekhine Defence, or commonly referred to in some circles as the Alekhine for ease of reference. This provocative opening makes its appearance with knight f6. Rather than first securing the center with e5 and then contemplating attacking white's center, the Alekhine attacks the e4 pawn, provoking an immediate imbalance, encouraging white to march forward with e5. White's options to challenge the Alekhine are quite limited, because defending the center with knight c3 not only allows a transposition into classical king-pawn territory with e5, the adventurous Alekhine player may prefer to strike in the center immediately with d5, provoking complications that are not unfavorable to black. The opening struggle begins after white takes more space and gains a tempo against black's knight with e5, when black centralizes the knight with knight d5, inviting white to gain another tempo while chasing the knight with c4, provoking the knight to retreat to the b6 square. The seemingly offside knight adds pressure against the pawn that just attacked it. White may decide to continue chasing black's knight with c5. Whenever you advance a pawn forward, you always have to consider the space left behind. In this case, continuing to chase black's knight does weaken the d5 square, so the knight may return to the centralized point with knight d5. White may once again attack this restless knight while actively developing the light-squared bishop with bishop c4. Although c6 is also an interesting option, black typically supports the knight with e6, revealing the dark-squared bishop's pressure against the c5 pawn. Black is not especially worried about bishop takes d5, surrendering the bishop pair while doubling black's pawns with e takes d5, as black is prepared to strike against white's center with d6, confronting white's pawns on the 5th rank. We'll take a look at what happens when white supports the advanced pawns with d4 in a moment, but it's worth noting that white can invite gambit play with knight c3, adding a second attacker against the knight, so black typically exchanges knights with knight takes c3. B takes c3, dreaming of a future d4, is well met by the timely d5, striking in the center with good play for black. White may decide to open the d-file as well as a path for the dark-squared bishop with d takes c3. Now that the d-file has been opened for white's queen, striking in the center with d5 is less effective, as white is happy to open up the position with en passant, c takes d6. There is no pressure to immediately capture the c5 pawn. A strong alternative is knight c6, attacking the other unprotected white pawn on the 5th rank. If black immediately plays bishop takes c5, then white will seek compensation for the pawn with queen g4, attacking the newly unprotected g7 pawn. It's important to avoid castling, as white has the strong response bishop h6, taking advantage of the pinned g7 pawn. It is possible to play g6, although this does weaken important dark squares on the king side. Retreating the bishop to f8 is more playable than it looks, preparing to strike against white's queen with h5 on the next move. In addition to the committal king f8, the interested viewer can also explore queen e7, returning the pawn if white plays queen takes g7, preparing to simplify the position by offering an exchange of queens with queen f8, leading to original, interesting play. No matter how black decides to respond to queen g4, white's active position fairly claims compensation for the pawn and is definitely worth exploring. Knight c3 leads to interesting play, but a more stable attempt is to support the vulnerable pawns on the 5th rank with d4. White has an impressive looking space advantage, but black has two important ways to challenge white's center. d6 is a typical pawn break in the Alekhine, when after the common exchange c takes d6, in c takes d6, this transposes into a line from the Alekhine variation of the Alekhine Defence. If black would prefer to keep the game in Alekhine territory, then another strong pawn break is b6, joining the dark-squared bishop in pressurizing the advanced c5 pawn. It's possible for white to immediately give up the bishop pair in order to compromise black's structure with bishop takes d5, and white may first decide to relieve the tension with c takes b6. Black's dark-squared bishop suddenly enjoys an open diagonal, and the rook on a8 is about to enjoy open lines on the a-file after a takes b6. If white continues with the natural developing move knight f3, then black is ready to exchange light-squared bishops with bishop a6, threatening to exchange white's best minor piece with a comfortable game. White can anticipate the light-squared bishop's pressure with knight e2, supporting the center while blocking the f1 to a6 diagonal, protecting the king, and allowing kingside castling. The immediate d6 is a strong pawn break to consider, and black may also continue with the plan of offering an exchange of light-squared bishops with bishop a6. If white decides to exchange bishops, this invites knight takes a6, eyeing the b4 square, as well as preparing a potential pawn break with c5. Retreating the bishop with bishop b3 allows active options such as bishop b4 check and knight c6, adding serious pressure against white's position. A double-edged choice is to play bishop takes d5, e takes d5. White has surrendered the bishop pair, and the newly unopposed light-squared bishop applies annoying pressure against white's king side. On the other hand, black does have double d-pawns, and white's e5 pawn still claims a central space advantage. With this in mind, black is prepared to resolve some of the structural issues with d6, preparing to undouble the pawns on the d-file. If white would like to discourage d6, an interesting attempt is knight b to c3, attacking the d5 pawn. It's possible to reinforce the center with the reactionary c6, a somewhat passive, although playable option. If black would prefer to emphasize piece activity, then black can ignore white's pressure and simply play d6, inviting white to capture the pawn. Black enjoys strong compensation for the pawn after d takes e5, clearing the diagonal for